Welcome back. We are working on Dandelion Week 1 Lesson 2. If you are watching this video, you should have already watched the Week 1 Lesson 1 video, and you should have already completed the reading for this week. In this particular lesson, we will go through some connections to the different elements that we learned in the first video, some noteworthy events from the reading, and a few other things kind of here and there to make sure that you have a good understanding of what happened in the novel this week. Let's go ahead and start with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, I give thanks for the gold in my life, for the people who are precious to me, for the happy moments I treasure, and for all that has been good over the years. May all that has been gold for me remind me always to appreciate all who are part of my life. Inspire me, Lord, to live in such a way that I help to bring out the best in others. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The first thing I think it would be good to talk about is where we saw some of the motivation in the reading for today. There are two places that we saw motivation today. The first was when Douglas wants new sneakers, and the second is when Bill Forrester mows the lawn again after he's already done it one time. Now, the first example of Douglas wanting new sneakers has to do with that motivation, as we were talking about in the Lesson 1 video, about pushing the novel forward. Douglas is our main character, and so really there's a lot of focus on him and what his wants, needs, desires, all that kind of thing, all that kind of stuff in the novel. So one of those things has to do with his sneakers. It seems really important to him, doesn't it, that he has these new sneakers. He sees them in the window, he knows that they're there, he asks his dad, and his dad's like, no, you don't need new sneakers, you have some other ones from last year in your closet. And he's like, no, I really need new ones. So he figures out a way to get new ones. He goes to the shoe store early in the morning and tells the shoe salesman, listen, I will do anything you need, okay? Sell me these shoes. I have some money, but the rest of it, I'll go and run all your errands. And since I have these brand new shoes, I'm going to run super fast. The really interesting thing about this is the shoes are not really significant in being shoes. He has other shoes. It's not like he doesn't have other shoes, and these are the only ones he's going to have. He wants new shoes because of the significance and what they represent for the rest of the summer. He wants them because they're squishy, like when you walk on new grass. He wants them because he thinks they'll be able to make him run faster, which is what he wants to do all summer long. They're really representative of his desire for a new start, for a new season. He looks at his old shoes, and they're shoes that are like kind of boot-like maybe, and they have leather on them, and they're heavy, and they're meant for winter. So he wants to cast those off aside, and instead he wants to have brand new sneakers for the summer so he can run faster and jump higher and do all the things that he wants to do for the summer. So the shoes in a lot of ways represent that new beginning in the same way that we see a new beginning for him for the summer. This novel takes place over the course of the summer, and we'll talk about that in a few slides when we discuss the setting. But for Douglas, the summer is really all of the world, right? Like so much of the winter and the fall and even most of the spring is going to school and depending upon where you live, bad weather and snow. He lives in Illinois, so there's probably some snow. So he's getting a chance here to start fresh and to start new. And that's what the sneakers mean to him. So if we're looking at his motivation, he doesn't just want new sneakers because he just wants new sneakers. He wants new sneakers because of what they represent, that newness, that exciting moment of being able to put them on and everything that summer means to him. And we'll see what that means as we read the novel as well. The second part of motivation here I wanted to talk to you about for just a minute has to do with Bill Forrester. Remember, Bill Forrester was out mowing the lawn, and grandfather was in his room, and he could hear the lawn being mowed, and he could smell the lawn being mowed, and he was like, oh, this is wonderful. This is when New Year's Day should begin. This is amazing. I really like this. Okay, and then he goes out to talk to Bill, and Bill says, well, I won't be mowing your lawn much longer because we got this fancy new sod I went and got for you. And he thinks he's doing a nice thing, right? He thinks he's doing something that's helpful. I got this fancy new sod, so I'm going to put that in, and then I won't have to mow your lawn pretty much ever again. You mow it once and it stays the same length, and that's pretty much it. And grandfather, instead of being grateful, which poor Bill Forster probably thought he was going to be, is like, no, this is an abomination, and mowing the lawn is one of the most wonderful things a person can do, and this is great and fantastic, and I can't believe that you would want to ruin it by putting in new grass. Don't you dare put in that new grass, Bill Forster. So they have this whole thing. And then grandfather goes back to bed. So he goes to take a nap. And then later, when he wakes up from his nap, he hears Bill Forster mowing the lawn again. And Bill Forster's not mowing the lawn again because he missed a spot. He's not mowing the lawn again because he didn't finish it the first time. The reason Bill Forster is mowing the lawn again is because grandfather explained to him how much joy and how much he likes and what it means to him to hear the sound of the lawnmower and the smell of the grass clippings. And that's something that's such an important part of his life that Bill Forster says, you know, I was trying to do this nice thing by putting in lawn that didn't need to be mowed to save grandpa and to save him some extra work and effort. But instead, I'm going to go ahead and just mow the lawn again because I know how much he enjoys it. And so when we're looking at motivation here, Bill Forster is not the protagonist of the story. He's not the central character. He's kind of a character off to the side. But it's interesting to note here why Bill Forster chooses to do what he does. He chooses to mow the lawn again because he cares about grandfather and he sees how important that is for him. This gives us some insight into Bill Forster as a character. We see that he's someone who cares about other people and wants the best for them. And we see that first when he thought that he was being helpful in buying the new grass, the new sod to put down. But we also see it in the way that he gives that up at any expense, it doesn't matter to him, so that he can clip the lawn more for grandpa because he knows he enjoys it. So the motivation in that first one with Douglas and the new sneakers is the motivation that moves the story forward. We're going to see a lot that comes from that. We're not going to see much that comes from Bill Forster and mowing the lawn. I don't know that we ever see him mow the lawn again in the novel, but it does give us some insight as to who he is as a character, and both of those things are important. The setting of the story. So we talked a little bit about setting in that first lesson for this week. So today we're going to talk about specifically the setting for this novel. So remember, we need both time and place. So the setting for DandelionWine is the summer of 1928 in Greentown, Illinois. That's the setting of the story. We need both of those things. Time, summer of 1928, as specific as we can be, and then the place, Greentown, Illinois. Now, it's not necessarily important that we have all of the individual places in Greentown listed. We don't necessarily need Douglas's grandparents' house and his house and the ice cream shop and the ravine and all of these other places. We don't need all of those listed because it takes place in the town. It's enough for us to say in Greentown, Illinois. We don't want to be so broad as to just give the state and to say Illinois, because that's a pretty big area. And depending upon where you are in that state, it could look very different. Downtown Chicago, Illinois is going to look very different than Greentown, Illinois. So it is good that we give the town or the city so that we can give some context, but we don't necessarily need to be so specific that we give the individual places within that town. Since it takes place all over, it's enough to say Greentown, Illinois. Now, for the inciting event. We saw it in the reading for today, and it's everything that kind of pushes the story forward. While the motivation of Douglas helps move the story forward, as we talked about a few slides ago, it's also important to look at an event that moves the story forward. And the event that moves this story forward is when Douglas realizes that he's really alive. This happens in chapter 1 when he's on the walk in the forest with his father and his brother. He's off walking along, and he sees all of these sights and smells all of these smells, and everything seems really overwhelming. And then he and his brother are wrestling, and he realizes, I'm alive. Now, this may seem like kind of a strange thing for us to have him, for him to realize. We know that we're alive, right? This isn't something that's hidden from us. It's like, yes, inhale, exhale, heart beating, yes, alive. But what's really happening here is Douglas understands what that means, that he's able to do things. He's kind of realizing that he's a little bit outside of himself now. so often, I think, especially when you're a little kid, your world is like right here. It's right here. And it's just you and you're a constant and everything in your world is pretty constant. And that's kind of it. Here, Douglas is realizing that he's a part of a bigger world. He's a part of nature. This is kind of one of the reasons why it's important and symbolic that it happens on this walk to gather those grapes with his father and his brother. So, in realizing that and realizing that he's alive, that's really the thing that inspires the rest of the novel. The rest of the novel is going to be Bradbury kind of showing us how Douglas is alive, and then also kind of contrasting that with death. So there's going to be some death that happens in the novel, and Douglas is going to struggle with that idea of life and death. But it was important for Bradbury to show us first that Douglas realizes that he's alive so that when he does encounter death, he can see that contrast. You remember that from the first lesson? He can see that contrast and that difference between him as someone who's alive and the people who die and what that really means. And understanding death and understanding the difference between those two is something that really happens when you get older. Douglas is growing up over the course of the summer, and this realization that he's alive is one of those things that starts it. We can see that it's something that's special to Douglas because his father recognizes it, but his younger brother Tom does not. So Tom doesn't really understand why this is significant or important, but his father is able to relate to him and say, yes, I understand this. I went through it too. I understand what you're saying. And in doing so, we can see, oh, this is a step that Douglas has to achieve in order to start to grow up, in order to start to mature. That's why Tom hasn't seen it yet, but Douglas's father has. So the inciting event is that moment, that time when he realizes I'm alive and this is really what's happening and I'm in this world. It's kind of a really impactful and momentous event for Douglas. And so therefore it's one of the things, it's the inciting event. It's what helps propel him forward on into the story. Okay, this slide's going to be a little bit longer than some of the others. So if you need to pause at any moment and jot down some ideas, feel free to do so. But I wanted to talk to you very briefly about, so I guess not very briefly, but I wanted to talk to you about some noteworthy events, some things that happened in the reading today that are important to go over and kind of keep in our minds. The first one we've talked about a little bit already, haven't we? Douglas gets his sneakers. I wanted to go a little bit further in that story because I talked about the importance of the sneakers themselves, but I think it's also important to note the importance of the sneakers with Doug's relationship to Mr. Sanderson. So Mr. Sanderson was the shoe salesman, and it's interesting to see Douglas describe all of these fantastic things that the shoes mean to him and what he's going to be able to do with them, because he encourages Mr. Sanderson to try the shoes on. He says, when was the last time you wore some sneakers? When was the last time you felt how light your feet could feel? Because Mr. Sanderson is probably wearing dress shoes, kind of like you wear to church or like your father wears to work or to church, but something that's pretty clunky and probably made of leather and not necessarily good for running in. So when he encourages Mr. Sanderson to try on the shoes and try on the sneakers, you can picture in your mind this older man who sold shoes his whole life saying, yeah, I should try them on. And he puts them on and he kind of bounces up and down and he's like, yeah, I can remember what this feels like. And he's kind of transported back to his childhood and he understands what Douglas is talking about. So that's an interesting event in the novel, I think, because we do get to understand what the sneakers mean to Douglas through looking at them through the eyes of Mr. Sanderson. So by seeing them through his eyes, we're able to compare how he's experiencing them with how Douglas experiences them. The second event is not really an event so much as Douglas and his brother Tom discussing the rituals that make up the summer. It's the third day of summer, so therefore we need to get the porch swing out. So he and his grandfather and Tom get the porch swing out and they hang it up, and everywhere else that's what's happening. We see that again when grandfather talks about how the mowing of the lawn should really be New Year's Day. That should be New Year's Day, the beginning of everything. That's something that happens every year. They make DandelionWine every year. So they're 4th of July every year. So there are certain things that are ritualistic in the summer that are important in sort of marking the passage of time. And we do that all the time, right? Like we have that with holidays, 4th of July and Christmas, but we also have it religiously, right? With our different liturgical seasons. Advent is an important part of preparing for Christmas. Lent is an important part of preparing for Easter. Ordinary time has its own place as well. The Easter season, all of these different things and these different rituals we have associated with these times kind of mark the progression of life forward. And that's what Douglas is seeing here. In the same way that he's noticed he's alive, he's also noticing, hey, there's things that happen every year. So in seeing that, Bradbury's kind of pointing out to us how rituals are important for our human experience and for us in noting the passing of time. It's also good because we get in this chapter, or not in this chapter, but in this reading, a hint about the lonely one who lives in the ravine. And the lonely one is kind of the dark character that we don't ever really see, but we hear about a lot in the story. So remember, Douglas goes out to play with his friends. And then Tom and his mother are sitting there waiting for him. And they have some ice cream and they're just kind of waiting. And you could kind of see, remember we talked about suspense? We can see the suspense sort of building because we notice that Douglas's mother is getting more and more worried and more concerned as time goes by. She's called for Douglas. She doesn't see him. So it's getting very late. So she takes Tom out by the hand and he can feel through her hand how nervous and worried she is. And it's very impactful for Tom because he's a little boy and you kind of feel like your parents are invincible when you're young. So it kind of worries him that his mother is this worried. And then when they go to the ravine, we learn about how the ravine's kind of this empty, expansive space that separates the town, and there's an air of mystery that kind of surrounds it. And, she's almost trembling. The mother's almost trembling with how worried she is. Tom can internalize that. And then Bradbury tells us a little bit about the lonely one, how there's this mysterious man or figure who's been going around and killing women. And so it adds to that suspense of like, oh no, there's someone out there who could legitimately hurt Douglas. This isn't just, him being out too late. Like something could have really bad have happened to him. And so in seeing that, A, we have that suspense, but B, we're introduced to the lonely one who supposedly lives in the ravine and is off harming people. Now, thankfully, Douglas is fine. It's no big deal. He says, I'm here. Everything's all right. I'm coming. Everything's okay. And so we have that experience of relief afterwards. And that's one of the interesting things about suspense, too, is that there's often that build up to something, but then there's a relief of, oh, everything's okay, that comes along with it. So we're introduced to the lonely one in the reading for today as well. The two other things I wanted to talk about are the happiness machine and Mrs. Bentley and the children. So first, let's talk about the happiness machine. Now, the happiness machine was just something that someone kind of mentioned, and Leo Hoffman was kind of like, yeah, I think I could do that. I think I could build that. And he decides that he's going to do it. Now, the hard part about it is that he doesn't really know what it's going to be. He doesn't really know what it's going to look like. He doesn't really know how to build it, but he's going to do it. So he goes out into his garage. He spends a lot of time over a good period of time working on the happiness machine and figuring it out. When he finally does and it's finished, he just kind of leaves it there. And then he notices that his son is crying almost uncontrollably. And he realizes that it was the machine, but he's like, oh, that can't be right. It's the happiness machine. It's supposed to make people happy. So his wife decides that she's going to go out. And I love the wife. She's a great character. She's decided that she's going to leave him. She's dividing everything in two. She thinks the whole idea of the happiness machine is ridiculous. But she says, okay, Leah, I'll go out and try it. So she goes out to try it. And she sits there. And at first, it's beautiful. She smells all of these wonderful things. She feels as though she's flying. She sees Paris. She sees all of these wonderful things. But then she starts to cry. And then Leo realizes that the machine doesn't make people happy. It makes them sad. And the reason she's so sad is because she didn't even know that she wanted to go dancing all the time. She didn't even know that she wanted to go to Paris. But now that she's seen all of these beautiful, wonderful things that were supposed to make her happy, and she realizes, I don't have any of these things. And that realization that not only does she not have them, but she's probably never going to have them, makes her really sad. So instead of giving people joy and happiness, the happiness machine makes them sad because they realize everything that they can't have. I think an interesting comparison we could have to this is television. And if you look at DandelionWine, TV is not really a thing. They have radios, and they have movies, but they don't really have television, especially not in the way that we have it now. 1928, TV wasn't really a thing. So they didn't have commercials. I think specifically commercials are what we can kind of compare it to in our lives. Think back to when you were younger, or if you have younger siblings or younger cousins. Think back to maybe if they've seen commercials on TV and they've seen advertisements for things and they were like, oh, I really want that. I want that, Mom, I want that. And it's like their life was totally complete and fine 30 seconds ago. And now that they've seen this, they realize that they're unhappy because they don't have this thing, whatever it is, this doodad gadget game thing that does the things with the sparkles and the lights and whatever. They thought that they were fine. And then all of a sudden they realize, no, my life isn't complete because I don't have this thing. And that's kind of what happens with the happiness machine is everyone was like, my life is good. I'm okay. I enjoy my life. Everything is great. But then they realize, oh, but I don't have this. I must not be happy because I don't have this other thing over here. I'm never going to get to go to that place. So since I'm never going to get to go to that place over there, I must not be happy because that looks happy and I don't have that. So I must not be happy. So that's what ends up happening to everyone who experiences the happiness machine. They just end up sad because instead of realizing how much they do have, they realize how much they don't have. So Leo, when he's standing there and the machine is, burning in the garage, and he looks over at his family and he sees all of them interacting together, his wife and his children, he realizes that that is really what the happiness machine is. It's something he had all along. And everyone's happiness machine is a little bit different. Happiness machine is a little bit different in that everyone's family and what they treasure and what they really love about their life is a little bit different. My family doesn't look like your family, and your family doesn't look like your friend's family, and whatever. But the important part there is that we should be happy with the things that we already have, right? It's that whole idea that God gives us that we're not supposed to desire the things of others. We're not supposed to covet things that belong to other people. Instead, we should be happy with the things that we have. And those things are really where we can find our happiness. So after that, we have Mrs. Bentley and the children. And Mrs. Bentley is so interesting because she's so very, very old and she has so much stuff. And all of the things she has, she thinks are keepsakes of her young life, pictures from when she was younger and when she was beautiful, programs from different plays and operas she's seen, tickets from different places she's been. She has all of this stuff. And the reason she has all of it is because she realized, I'm getting older and I'm not going to be young and beautiful for forever. I need to hang on to these memories and I need to treasure them. I need to keep them close to me. But the memory itself wasn't enough. She wanted the physical, tangible thing of it. So in having that physical, tangible thing of whatever it was, she thought that she was holding on to her youth. But the children don't see it that way. The children look at her and they just see an old woman, particularly because she's new to the town. She isn't someone who's lived there forever. She's relatively new. And so when they see her, they just see an old woman. And for a child, they can't ever fathom a time when an old person wasn't old, which sounds like a terrible thing, but is kind of true. I was thinking about it. My grandmother, in my mind, is always 65. She's been dead for years now, but in my mind, she looks the same right before she died as she did when she was much younger, when I was a little kid. And she didn't ever age in my mind. And I feel like that's kind of true for little kids. My kids don't know me when I was a kid. They just know me as their mother. And you, the same with your parents, just know them as your parents. So the idea that they were once young and did things like you do is kind of a weird thing to think about. But instead of just being like, the children are not old enough yet to understand that, oh, yes, time has passed. I too shall age, and one day I too will be old. To them, they're always going to be young because they've been young for their whole lives. And someone that's old has been old for all of the young children's lives. So that's always going to be a constant for them. That's their perception of it. We know that that's not true, but that's their perception of it. So when we look at Mrs. Bentley, she has that revelation where she imagines the ghost of her husband and she hears his voice. Because even when he was alive, he was telling her, you don't need to hang on to all of these things. They're not going to make you feel any younger. They're not important. Just let them go and just be yourself. Be who you are now in the present. Don't try to hold on to who you once were. You can't go back to being her. Instead, enjoy being who you are now. So then when we see Mrs. Bentley and the children at the end of that chapter, they keep saying to her, you've always been old, right? And she's like, yes, I've always been old. And we will never be as old as you, right? And she says, no, you'll never be as old as me. Because in reality, we're only who we are right now, right? We don't know that tomorrow's not guaranteed to us, right? We have to live for now and we have to live for today. We can only do what we can now and today. We can only be good for God now and today because tomorrow's not promised to us. I think it was St. Teresa of Lisieux who had a reflection about Jesus and said, Jesus, you know that I only have today for you. This is the only gift I can give you is my today because I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow and I can't focus on the past. Instead, I can only give to you what I have to you today. And I'm paraphrasing. She said it much better than that, but it's something along those lines. And that's kind of the message that we're getting from Bradbury here, is that instead of trying to hold on to who we once were or to worry about what we one day will be, we need to focus on who we are now and live the best life and the best day that we can. So those are kind of all of the noteworthy events and fun things. Fun. The lonely one, probably not so much fun, but those are all of the things that happened that were pretty significant in the reading for this week. So jot them down. I hope you took good notes or paused if you needed to write stuff down. And then we'll get started talking a little bit about what to expect in the next week. Okay, so this is the end of class for this week, the end of your second video. You need to go now and work on your assignments that you have for the week, both your study guide and your written response if you have not already done so. So spend some time working on those. And then I will see you next week.